Humanity had always believed it was destined for the stars. But the stars did not belong to humanity. The war had begun 6 months ago, when the Xan'Thal Dominion arrived in full force. They hadn't spoken. They hadn't made demands. They simply appeared, their obsidian warships gliding into orbit over Terran colonies and unleashing hellfire from the skies. It was a massacre. The Dominion's technology was centuries ahead of humanity's best. Their warships carried plasma lances that tore through Earth's battlecruisers as if they were made of paper. Their engines allowed them to phase into and out of real space, bypassing entire defensive fleets with surgical precision. The Terran Federation Navy, once the proud guardians of humanity, was now on its last legs. Every major fleet engagement had ended in disaster. Every counter-offensive had been crushed. And now, Alpha Centauri, the last line of defense before Earth, was under siege. Admiral Alias Rourke stood on the command deck of the TNS Retribution, the last Terran battleship in the system. His hands rested on the metal railing, his eyes locked onto the swirling holographic battle map in front of him. Red enemy markers flooded the screen, hundreds of Xan'Thal warships phasing into existence just outside of orbital range. They were coming, and humanity wasn't ready. "Sir, Dominion fleet has entered attack formation," said Commander Aiko Vasquez, his second in command. Her voice was calm, professional, but Rourke could hear the tension beneath it. Rourke exhaled slowly. "How long until they're within firing range?" "Less than 2 minutes." The Retribution was surrounded by the last remnants of the Terran defense fleet, a handful of battered destroyers, 3 heavily damaged cruisers, and the scattered remnants of the Alpha Centauri Planetary Defense Force. This was not a fleet. It was a graveyard in waiting. Rourke's grip tightened on the railing. His crew was waiting for his command, but deep down, they already knew the truth. This battle was unwinnable, but that didn't mean they wouldn't fight. "Open a fleet-wide channel," Rourke ordered. The comms officer nodded. "You're live, sir." Rourke took a breath and spoke. "This is Admiral Rourke. You all know what we're up against. You all know the odds." His voice was steady, unyielding. "But the enemy thinks we're broken. They think we'll just roll over and die." Silence. "But they don't know us," he said, his voice hardening. "They don't know that humans don't break. They don't know that we will fight to our last breath. They don't know that today, right here, right now, we make our stand." Another silence. Then a single voice crackled through the fleet comms. "With you till the end, sir." Another voice. Then another. A broken fleet, a hopeless battle, and yet they still stood together. Rourke turned to his weapons officer. "Target the enemy flagship." The officer hesitated. "Sir, the only thing we have that could punch through its shields is the Nova Lance." A hush fell over the bridge. The Nova Lance. A prototype antimatter weapon so powerful that, in testing, it had overloaded and nearly destroyed the ship firing it. It had never been used in combat. But right now, it was the only weapon that might, just might, give humanity a chance. Rourke clenched his jaw. "Charge the Nova Lance." "Sir, if we fire that thing, there's a 50% chance our reactor will—" "I know the risks." Rourke cut in. No more words were needed. The Retribution's power grid dimmed as energy was diverted to the Nova Lance. The ship's hull groaned under the strain. Lights flickered. The crew braced for what was to come. The Dominion fleet advanced. The order was given, and the last Terran battleship prepared to unleash hell. The Xan'Thal were not used to resistance. For 6 months, they had annihilated every human fleet they encountered. They moved like a storm of fire, sweeping across the galaxy with surgical precision. They never lost. Today, that would change. Admiral Alias Rourke stood at the center of the TNS Retribution's command bridge, his hands locked behind his back as the enemy fleet advanced. The Dominion's obsidian warships glided forward in perfect formation, their weapons humming with deadly energy. "Sir, we're nearly in firing range," Commander Aiko Vasquez said, her voice tight. Rourke didn't answer immediately. He watched the enemy fleet, his mind racing through probabilities, battle tactics, every possible way to turn this disaster into a victory. And then he saw it. The Xan'Thal were focused entirely on the retribution. They weren't paying attention to the 3 damaged Terran cruisers drifting lifelessly in the debris field behind them. To the enemy, those ships were already dead. They had no idea that their engines had been powered down deliberately. No idea that inside, Terran crews waited with fingers on the triggers of nuclear-tipped torpedoes. A plan formed in Rourke's mind. It was reckless. It was desperate. But it was their only chance. He turned sharply. "All ships, execute flanking maneuver. Theta 7. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what that order meant. The retribution would hold position and draw enemy fire, keeping the Dominion fleet locked in place. Meanwhile, the 3 cruisers, disguised as wreckage, would reactivate their systems, flank the enemy, and unleash hell. It was a suicide run. But if it worked, the Dominion's entire vanguard would be crippled in one strike. Rourke's voice was calm. "Transmit the order." A moment later, the reply came through comms. "Acknowledged, Admiral. We'll hit them hard." Then, silence. This was it. The Retribution's engines dimmed, its movement slowing to a near stop. Weapons powered down just enough to make it look like the ship was struggling to stay operational. The bait was set. The Xan'Thal took it. Enemy warships surged forward, moving in for the killing blow. Their plasma lances charged, energy building. Then, all hell broke loose. The 3 Terran cruisers ignited their engines, roaring to life as they cut through the debris field at full burn. Their missile bays opened, launching a full spread of nuclear-tipped torpedoes at the heart of the enemy formation. The Dominion fleet hesitated. And in war, hesitation was death. The first torpedo detonated. A white-hot explosion ripping through the void, blinding sensors and overloading shields. A second torpedo pierced the hull of a Dominion dreadnought, tearing it apart from the inside out. Then the third, then the fourth. The enemy formation collapsed. And the Retribution struck with everything it had. "Fire everything!" Rourke bellowed. The battleship's Nova cannons roared, unleashing a storm of energy that slammed into the confused, reeling enemy fleet. Plasma batteries lit up the darkness, tearing through Xan'Thal armor. On the bridge, alarms blared. The enemy was firing back now, their fleet reeling but still dangerous. "Sir, incoming return fire!" The Retribution shook violently as plasma lances impacted the hull. Entire sections of the ship ruptured, explosions rocking the decks. Crew members screamed as damage reports flooded the system. Rourke barely had time to react before another massive explosion erupted across the forward hull. The Retribution was dying. And so was the fleet. But then, a new signal appeared on the scanners. Not Xan'Thal, something else, something human. The comms officer's voice cracked with disbelief. "Sir, we're picking up a warp signature." And then a Terran battleship dropped out of warp. Not just any battleship, the TNS Titan, the largest, most powerful warship ever built by human hands. And it had just entered the battlefield. Rourke stared at the massive vessel, its dark steel hull covered in weapon systems the enemy had never seen before. A message came through comms, a voice Rourke hadn't heard in years. "Looks like you could use some help, Admiral." Rourke exhaled sharply. Then, a grin. "Damn right we could." The battle wasn't over yet. It was just beginning. The arrival of the TNS Titan changed everything. For the first time in the war, the Xan'Thal hesitated. The Dominion war fleet, once an unstoppable wave of destruction, suddenly pulled back. its formations shifting into a defensive posture. Their cold, machine-like precision wavered as they analyzed this new threat. Admiral Elias Rourke stood on the damaged bridge of the TNS Retribution, staring at the massive warship through the viewport. The Titan was a behemoth, over 3 kilometers long, its hull lined with weapon systems that had never been tested in actual combat. Humanity's last, best hope had just entered the fight, and it was time to strike back. "Comms!" Rourke barked. "Patch me through to the Titan." A second later, the holo display flickered to life. A familiar face appeared, a man Rourke hadn't seen in over a decade. Admiral Grant Vale. Once a legend in the Terran Navy, Vale had vanished from public sight years ago. Some said he'd gone rogue. Others whispered about classified military projects, secret weapons being developed in the outer colonies. Now, the truth was staring Rourke in the face. Vale was back, and he had brought something monstrous with him. "Looks like you could use some help, Elias," Vale said, his voice laced with amusement. Rourke exhaled sharply. "I won't argue. You sure picked one hell of a time to show up." Vale's eyes flicked to the battle map. "Situation?" Rourke didn't waste time. "We took out a chunk of their forward fleet, but the Retribution is barely holding together. Our flanking maneuver hit them hard, but the bastards are regrouping. If we give them time, they'll phase out and reposition before we can finish them." Vale nodded. "Then we don't give them time." The Titan's hull shifted, revealing massive weapon arrays that had never been seen on a Terran warship before. Experimental railguns, plasma displacement cannons, and something else. A weapon that shouldn't exist. A graviton disruptor. Rourke's breath caught. "Grant, what the hell is that?" Vale smirked. "Something new." Before Rourke could respond, Vale's voice hardened. "We're moving in. I need your fleet to hit them from the flank while we cut through their core. Your ship still operational?" Rourke looked at the battered remains of the Terran fleet, what was left of it. "We'll manage." "Good. Then let's finish this." The comms cut, and the Titan surged forward. The counter-offensive begins. The Xan'Thal fleet adjusted, shifting formations, preparing for the Titan's attack. They were fast. They were precise. But they had never fought a ship like this. The Titan's railguns fired first, unleashing hypersonic slugs that punched through 3 enemy warships in a single shot. Shields collapsed. Hulls ruptured. The battlefield erupted in fire. Then came the graviton disruptor. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, space itself warped. The weapon tore into the enemy fleet, collapsing gravity fields, distorting time-space. Enemy ships buckled and twisted, their hulls ripping apart as they were pulled into a singularity of pure destruction. The Xan'Thal had no defense against it, and Rourke took his chance. "All ships, attack!" The remaining Terran forces surged forward, hitting the enemy from the flank just as the Titan tore through their center. Plasma batteries lit up the void, missiles streaked through space, and railguns tore through enemy formations. The Xan'Thal started to fall. One by one, their warships exploded, crumbling under the relentless assault. And then, the Xan'Thal command ship began to retreat. Rourke saw it instantly. "They're phasing out!" Vale's voice came through comms. "Not if I can help it!" The Titan shifted, its graviton disruptor charging again. A shockwave rippled through space as the weapon fired, disrupting the enemy's phase drive mid-jump. The Xan'Thal flagship flickered, then violently snapped back into real space. Dead in the water. Exposed. Rourke didn't hesitate. "All ships! Focus fire!" Every remaining Terran warship turned its weapons on the crippled enemy flagship. The Retribution, still barely holding together, fired its last railgun salvo. The Titan fired a full spread of nuclear torpedoes. And then, the Xan'Thal flagship erupted in a blinding explosion, its remains scattering across the void. For the first time since the war began, humanity had won. Aftermath, and the next threat. The battlefield was silent. Smoke and wreckage drifted through space as the last remnants of the Xan'Thal fleet fled into the void. They were beaten, but Rourke knew better than to celebrate. He turned to Vasquez. "Casualties?" She hesitated. "Heavy, sir," Rourke exhaled. They had won, but the cost was steep. And then, Vale's voice cut through the silence. "We need to talk." Rourke frowned. "About what?" Vale's face was grim. "This war isn't over." Rourke stiffened. "You saw what we just did. We hit them hard." Vale's expression didn't change. "That wasn't their full force, Elias." Rourke's stomach dropped. Vale's next words sent a cold chill through him. "The real invasion fleet is coming." Silence. And then, the war drums began again. War had never felt so inevitable. The victory at Alpha Centauri had given humanity a moment to breathe. But that breath was short-lived, because the real invasion fleet was coming, and this time there would be no retreat. Admiral Elias Rourke stood inside Terran High Command, a fortified military complex buried beneath the surface of Earth. The room was packed with officers, generals, and political leaders, all staring at the holographic display floating in the center of the war room. It showed the incoming Xan'Thal Armada, and it was worse than anything they had ever imagined. Thousands of enemy warships, dreadnoughts larger than cities, planetary siege platforms capable of cracking Earth's crust like glass. The Dominion hadn't sent an invasion force before. They had sent a scouting fleet, and now they were sending their full strength. The room was dead silent. No one wanted to speak first. Finally, President Elena Kasparov, leader of the Terran Federation, broke the silence. "This is extinction." Her voice was cold, emotionless, a woman facing the end of her species. "The retribution is barely holding together," said General Anders, Supreme Commander of the Army. "The fleet we have left is a fraction of what we started with. Even with the Titan, we're outnumbered 100 to 1. A grim truth settled over the room. No one had a solution, because there wasn't one. Unless we fight. All eyes turned to Rourke. He stepped forward, his jaw clenched, his voice steady. "We fight," he repeated, "because there's no other choice." The holographic display shifted, showing a tactical map of Earth's defenses. "What we have isn't enough," Rourke admitted, "but we make it enough." He pointed at the Titan schematics. "This ship proved that we can still fight them. We use this technology. We retrofit every remaining warship with whatever we can salvage." Vale, standing beside him, nodded. "We've got classified weapons still in prototype phases. AI-controlled defense platforms, antimatter torpedoes, planetary rail cannons." Rourke's voice hardened. "We bring everything to this fight." A beat of silence. Then General Anders straightened. "You're asking us to turn Earth into a battlefield." Rourke's response was immediate. "It already is." The final plan. The Terran Federation mobilized. Factories went into overdrive, mass-producing weapons, warships, planetary defenses. Orbital battle stations were armed with nuclear warheads, the last deterrence against planetary annihilation. Every surviving shipyard in the Sol system churned out emergency war frigates, hastily armed and barely tested. And on Lunar Base, Earth's moon, a final, desperate experiment was taking shape. Project Ragnarok. A weapon so dangerous, so unpredictable, that it had been sealed away decades ago. Now, it was Earth's only hope. The countdown begins 72 hours until the invasion. The Xan'Thal fleet was almost here, and when they arrived, Earth would make its last stand. The Xan'Thal invasion fleet arrived like the hand of a god. Massive dreadnoughts, each the size of a city, emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Their hulls were obsidian black, lined with pulsating veins of blue energy like living organisms. They came in waves. First, the Vanguard, thousands of interceptor-class warships, fast and deadly, moving like a swarm of locusts. Then, The siege fleet, colossal war carriers armed with planetary bombardment cannons capable of reducing continents to rubble. Finally, the flagship, a Leviathan-class behemoth, so massive that its gravity well-distorted space-time itself. Humanity's final battle had begun. Terran High Command. Underground war room, Earth Admiral Elias Rourke stood at the center of the chaos, his gaze locked onto the battle map. Red markers, enemy ships, filled the screen, outnumbering the Terran fleet nearly 100 to 1. General Anders slammed a fist on the table. Jesus Christ, we're looking at complete planetary annihilation. President Elena Kasparov remained silent, her hands clenched as she stared at the hologram. Rourke's voice was like steel. We hold the line. He turned to Admiral Grant Vale, the Titan's commanding officer. Get your ship in position. We take out their command vessel first. Vale nodded. Acknowledged. Rourke activated the fleet-wide comms channel. All ships. This is it. His voice was calm, unwavering. This is our last stand. There is no retreat. There is no surrender. We fight or we die. A pause. Then a single response came through the comms. With you till the end, sir. And then another, and another, until the entire fleet spoke as one. With you till the end. Rourke exhaled. Then let's make them bleed. The battle for Earth begins. The Xan'Thal fleet advanced. Earth's defenses opened fire. From the orbital platforms, massive rail cannons thundered, launching hypervelocity slugs at near-light speed. Nuclear-tipped torpedoes streaked through space, detonating in bursts of white-hot energy. The Titan surged forward, its graviton disruptor firing, warping space, tearing through the enemy vanguard like a blade through flesh. And then the enemy retaliated. The Xan'Thal dreadnoughts fired their plasma lances, sending cascades of molten energy tearing through the void. One by one, Terran warships exploded, their hulls shattered like glass. We're losing ships fast, Vasquez shouted from the Retribution's tactical console. Rourke clenched his jaw. Stay on target. We take out their flagship. The Titan led the charge, its experimental railguns ripping into the enemy war formation. But then, the Xan'Thal flagship's main cannon began to charge, a weapon so powerful it could rip an entire moon in half. And it was aiming directly at Earth. Rourke's blood ran cold. Target that weapon, now! But it was too late. The Xan'Thal flagship fired. A beam of pure annihilation tore through space, aimed straight at Earth's surface. And then, Project Ragnarok activated. The last hope. Project Ragnarok. Deep beneath Luna Base, a hidden weapon came online. AI-controlled defense stations powered up. A massive structure buried beneath the moon's surface rotated into position. And then, a planetary rail cannon the size of a skyscraper fired. A single, hypersonic round, lined with dark matter, ripped through the void at near-light speed. It intercepted the enemy's planet-killer beam and tore through the Xan'Thal flagship's core. The Leviathan-class warship shuddered, and then, in a massive explosion, it was gone. For the first time, the Xan'Thal fleet hesitated, and humanity struck back, the turning point. With the enemy flagship destroyed, the Titan and the remaining Terran fleet surged forward. Earth's defenses held, rail cannons tearing through enemy warships, AI-controlled drone swarms overwhelming the vanguard. And then, the Xan'Thal did something they had never done before. They retreated. The survivors of their fleet phased out, fleeing into hyperspace. And just like that, Earth had survived. But Rourke knew the truth. This wasn't over. The Xan'Thal had underestimated humanity, and now they would come back stronger. But next time, humanity would be ready. The war should have been over. The Xan'Thal had retreated. Earth still stood. And yet, in the pit of Admiral Elias Rourke's gut, something felt wrong. He stood on the command deck of the TNS Retribution, watching as crews scrambled to assess damage reports from the battle. The Titan drifted nearby, its weapons still hot from the fight. Rourke turned to Commander Aiko Vasquez, his second in command. "Status," she exhaled. "Heavy casualties, sir. 40% of the fleet is gone. Earth's defenses held, but..." She hesitated. "But what?" Vasquez's eyes flickered to the holographic tactical display. "We're picking up a new signal." Rourke frowned. "Survivors." "No, sir." She tapped the console, magnifying the scan. "It's something else." Rourke's gut twisted as he looked at the data. Something was coming. And it wasn't Xan'Thal. The unknown approaches. A deep, unnatural vibration rippled through the ship, an energy wave so foreign that it sent a static hum through every electronic system. Then, a tear in space. A massive rift, black as a dying star, opened beyond Pluto's orbit. And something stepped through. Not one ship, not a fleet, a colossus, larger than any structure Rourke had ever seen. It was not made of metal. It was not a warship. It was something ancient, something alive, and it was watching. The bridge fell silent. No alarms blared, no sirens screamed, because the ship, if it could even be called that, defied explanation. Commander Vasquez's voice was barely a whisper. "Sir, what the hell is that?" Rourke didn't answer, because for the first time in his life, he didn't know. First, contact. The holographic display flickered. The lights on the bridge dimmed. And then, a voice. Not over comms, not through radio waves, inside their minds. "You are not ready." A wave of cold dread washed over the bridge crew. "Who's there?" Rourke demanded, his voice sharp. The presence shifted, a formless intelligence beyond comprehension. "You believe this war is over. It is not. You fight the Xan'Thal as if they are the greatest threat. They are nothing." Silence. Rourke's blood ran cold. "Then what are you?" he asked, his throat dry. A pause. Then, "We are the architects. And we have returned." The rift in space pulsed, and the colossal entity began to move forward, toward Earth. And for the first time in the war, Rourke felt true fear. The rift pulsed, a silent wound in the fabric of space. The architect's vessel, if it could even be called that, drifted forward, its surface shifting like liquid metal, yet its structure remained eerily unchanging. It was not mechanical. It was not biological. It was something else entirely. And it was watching. Admiral Elias Rourke stood motionless on the bridge of the TNS Retribution, heart pounding as the alien entity loomed before them. Then, the voice returned. "You seek to understand." It wasn't sound. It wasn't words in any traditional sense. It was direct thought, injected into the minds of every human aboard the fleet. Commander Aiko Vasquez gripped the railing, her face pale. "Sir, this thing is inside our heads." Rourke forced himself to remain calm. "Identify yourself." A pause. Then the presence shifted, expanding beyond comprehension. "We are the architects. We are the ones who built the first civilizations. We are the last remnant of what was before." The lights flickered as the transmission deepened. And then, the holographic display changed. It was no longer showing the battle map. It was showing something else. A vision. A galaxy burning. The truth of the war. The image rippled, shifting through time and space. Worlds crumbling, civilizations wiped from existence. A war beyond human comprehension. And, at the center of it all, a race older than time itself. The Xan'Thal are not your enemy. The words sent a chill through the bridge crew. Vasquez's voice was barely a whisper. Then, who is? The vision shifted, and Rourke saw them. A race so ancient, so powerful, that even the architects feared them. They were not like the Xan'Thal. They did not conquer. They did not negotiate. They consumed. They are coming. And your war with the Xan'Thal has only made you weaker. If you do not stand together, you will all be erased. Silence. The holographic projection faded, and the bridge crew stared at one another, stunned. Rourke clenched his fists. You're saying the Xan'Thal will be destroyed too? The architects did not answer, because they did not need to. The truth was clear. The war with the Xan'Thal had been a distraction. The true enemy was still coming. And humanity had only months to prepare. The architects' presence withdrew, their colossal ship hovering in silence. Then, their final words echoed in Rourke's mind. Choose. Stand alone and be erased, or unite and stand a chance. The rift pulsed again, and suddenly, a new signal appeared on sensors. Not architects, not the Xan'Thal, the real enemy. They had arrived. The Xan'Thal had spent 6 months trying to wipe humanity from existence. Now, they were humanity's only hope for survival. Admiral Elias Rourke stood in the war room of the Titan, staring at the incoming transmission. On the holographic display, the Xan'Thal Supreme Warlord, an ancient, towering figure with obsidian armor and glowing violet eyes, stared back. Tension thickened the air. The last time they had spoken, it had been a demand for unconditional surrender. Now, the fate of both species hung in the balance. We should kill you where you stand, human. The words were hateful, filled with centuries of Xan'Thal superiority. Rourke didn't flinch. If you want to survive, you'll shut the hell up and listen. Silence. The Xan'Thal War Council, seated behind their leader, hissed in outrage. Rourke held his ground. The architects showed us the truth, he said. You saw it too. The Xan'Thal warlord remained still. The force that's coming doesn't care about your empire, Rourke continued. It doesn't care about our war. It will erase you. It will erase us. It will erase everything. The warlord's eyes narrowed. And what would you propose? Human. Rourke's jaw tightened. An alliance. A murmur rippled through the Xan'Thal delegation. The mere thought of it was heresy to them. But the vision from the architects had been undeniable. They had no choice. The warlord leaned forward. Then, hear our terms. And just like that, enemies became allies. The alliance is forged. The next 24 hours were spent in intense negotiations. Every word was a battle. The Xan'Thal demanded access to Earth's weapon technology. Humanity refused. Humanity demanded the Xan'Thal's war fleets fight under Terran command. The Xan'Thal refused. It was not peace. It was necessity. But in the end, a compromise was reached. A joint military force, the largest in galactic history, would be formed. Xan'Thal war fleets would reinforce Earth's defenses. Humanity would deploy its advanced AI and experimental weapons to assist the Xanthal's forces. Both sides would coordinate through a shared war council. It was an alliance of hatred, distrust, and desperation. But it was the only chance of survival. And just in time, because the enemy had arrived. The enemy makes its first move. The first attack came without warning. A Xan'Thal colony, one of their oldest, strongest worlds, was there one moment and gone the next. No distress signal, no battle, just silence. Rourke stood in the Titan's command center, staring at the sensor data. Jesus, whispered Vasquez, the whole system is just gone. Gone. Erased from existence. Vale's expression was grim. This isn't war. This is extermination. Rourke clenched his fists. How long until they reach us? A pause. Then the architect spoke. Soon, The last war begins. For the first time in history, Xan'Thal and humans trained side by side. Terran Marines and Xan'Thal warriors drilled for urban combat. Earth's scientists and Xan'Thal engineers worked to merge their technologies into new experimental warships. The Titan became the heart of the Alliance fleet, overseeing the mass mobilization of ships across human and Xan'Thal space. But it still wouldn't be enough, because the enemy was unlike anything they had ever faced. And when they arrived, the war for existence would begin. The Revenant moved like a ghost through the void. A stealth-class frigate, the fastest and most advanced reconnaissance vessel in the Terran fleet. Equipped with active camouflage plating, thermal dampening fields, and a prototype quantum cloaking system, it was designed for one purpose: to go where no one else could. And right now, it was heading straight into hell. Captain Doran Hale sat in the command chair, his jaw tight as he stared at the sensor display. The Revenant was running dark, every system dampened to avoid detection. They were deep in enemy-controlled space now, and they were not alone. "Jesus," whispered Lieutenant Mira Vasquez, the ship's tactical officer. The holographic display flickered, revealing the first real scans of the enemy fleet. It was unlike anything Hale had ever seen. Not ships, not machines. Something worse. First contact with the enemy. The enemy fleet hung in the void, like a hive of nightmares. There were no hard angles, no traditional hulls. Their ships were organic, shifting, alive. Black masses of chitinous armor and writhing tendrils pulsing with sickly red energy. And they were growing. Hale's stomach turned. "They're alive." Vasquez's fingers trembled over her console. "Sir, I think they're feeding." Hale's eyes snapped to the main display. That's when he saw it. A derelict space station floating near the enemy fleet. Or at least, what used to be a space station. Now, it was a husk, covered in the same writhing black tendrils as the enemy ships. They had infested it, consumed its metal, reshaped it into something new. And then, one of the enemy ships detached from the hive. It pulsed, it shifted, and it became another warship. The realization hit Hale like a hammer. They don't build their fleet. His voice was hollow. Vasquez swallowed hard. They grow it. The mission takes a turn. Hale forced himself to focus. Get the data. We need to get the hell out of here. The Revenant's AI system worked fast, scanning the organic vessels, analyzing their structure, movement patterns, and energy readings. Then, the stealth alarms blared. Something had seen them. A wave of cold horror swept through the crew. "That's impossible," Vasquez whispered. "We're cloaked." The enemy ships shifted. Then, in perfect unison, they turned toward the Revenant and charged. The escape. "Full burn, now!" Hale roared. The Revenant's engines ignited, the ship twisting into a high-speed evasive maneuver. But the enemy was fast. Too fast. The first organic warship closed the distance in seconds, tendrils extending from its hull like spears. It wasn't firing weapons. It was trying to consume them. "Evasive action! Fire rear torpedoes!" The Revenant's missile tubes flared to life, unleashing a barrage of high-yield plasma torpedoes. The projectiles detonated on impact, but instead of destroying the enemy ship, it absorbed the energy and grew larger. "That's not fair," Vasquez shouted. "Firing main cannon!" The gunnery officer launched a railgun round, the kinetic slug punching through the organic ship's hull. It shuddered, leaking black ichor into space. But it wasn't dead. It was adapting. "Holy shit," Hale breathed. "They evolve in real time." Then, more of them broke off from the hive. Hundreds. The Revenant was out of time. "Activate the quantum drive," Hale bellowed. The helmsman's fingers flew across the controls. Spooling up! 5 seconds! The enemy ships closed in. Tendrils lashed out. 4 seconds. The Revenant's shields flickered as the enemy pierced through the outer plating. 3 seconds. The ship shook violently as hull breaches erupted across the lower decks. 2 seconds. Hale grabbed onto his chair, holding on for dear life. 1 second. Jump! The quantum drive engaged, ripping the ship into faster-than-light travel, just as the enemy ships collided into empty space. The Revenant was gone. Back at the Titan, Hale's body ached as he sat in the debriefing room aboard the Titan, surrounded by Admiral Rourke, Vale, and the Xan'Thal warlord. The footage played on a loop in the holographic display. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Finally, Rourke let out a slow breath. "We're not fighting an empire." Vale shook his head. "We're fighting a plague." Hale's voice was hoarse. "They don't just destroy, they consume, and they grow stronger every time they do." The Xan'Thal warlord's expression was unreadable. Then he turned to Rourke. "The architects were right. This war is no longer about survival. It is about extinction." Rourke clenched his fists. They had seen the true enemy. Now, they had to figure out how to kill it. Time was running out. The Revenant's escape had proven one thing. This enemy wasn't just stronger. It wasn't just faster. It was adaptive. And unless they found a way to kill it, there would be no war. Only extinction. Admiral Elias Rourke sat at the head of the War Council, surrounded by human and Xan'Thal leaders. On the holographic display, the footage from the Revenant's mission played on a loop. Every time it ended, the room was silent, because no one had an answer. Finally, President Kasparov spoke, her voice tight. "We need options." Xan'Thal High, Warlord Zalvun crossed his arms. "No conventional weaponry will suffice. These creatures consume energy. They evolve with every attack." Vale exhaled sharply. "Then we give them something they can't evolve against." All eyes turned to him. The holographic display changed. Blueprints appeared. A weapon, something buried in classified military archives, forgotten for decades. Project Thanatos. A weapon designed not to destroy, but to erase. Project Thanatos. The last resort. Rourke frowned as he studied the schematics. "This looks like a quantum destabilizer." Vale nodded. "It is, but on a planetary scale." The room stiffened. A quantum destabilizer was not a bomb. It was a fundamental disruption of physics itself. It didn't just kill life, it prevented it from ever existing again. Kasparov's eyes were cold. "You're suggesting we deploy a weapon that erases an entire region of space?" Vale's voice was grim. "If we don't, there won't be a galaxy left to save." Silence. The Xan'Thal warlord studied the blueprints. His species had conquered and crushed 100 civilizations, and even he looked unsettled. "Your species is terrifying. Human," he admitted. Rourke exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Can we build it?" Vale nodded. "We still have fragments of dark matter weaponization research. If we can combine it with architect technology..." Kasparov cut him off. "Then do it." The race against time. The greatest minds of two civilizations worked around the clock. On Luna Base, engineers rebuilt the Project Ragnarok rail cannon to accommodate the new payload. The architects remained silent, watching, and deep in the void. The enemy was moving. The enemy's next move. The first attack came without warning. A Terran colony in the Orion system vanished. Nothing left. Not debris, not radiation, just emptiness. "They're accelerating," Vasquez whispered. "At this rate, they'll be here in 3 weeks." That wasn't enough time. The Thanatos weapon was still unfinished. And if they didn't have it ready, then nothing would be left. The Thanatos warhead pulsed with raw, uncontained power. A weapon that should not exist. A weapon that violated the laws of physics. And now, it was humanity's only hope. Admiral Elias Rourke stood inside the Lunar Base war room, staring at the containment field where the weapon was being prepared. It looked almost unimpressive. A sleek obsidian core, surrounded by rotating dark matter rings, energy coursing through its structure like veins of lightning. But he knew the truth. This thing could end a star system, or tear open reality itself. And they were about to fire it. The plan. It's not stable. Vale's voice was tight as he read the diagnostics. This thing was never meant to be used in combat. Kasparov folded her arms. We don't have a choice. Xan'Thal warlord Zalvoon studied the weapon with unreadable eyes. Your kind is reckless, human. Rourke let out a breath. That's why we're still here. He turned to Vasquez. Targeting? She hesitated. The enemy fleet is advancing on the Proxima Centauri system. If we deploy Thanatos there, we can cut them off before they reach Sol. The room fell silent, because they all knew the risk. If the Thanatos weapon malfunctioned, it wouldn't just destroy the enemy. It could consume space itself. And if that happened, Earth was next. The final decision. Rourke looked at his crew, looked at everything they had left. There was no time, no backup plan. Only one question remained. Did they fire the weapon, or did they hesitate, knowing it could doom them all? Rourke clenched his fists. Then he gave the order. Deploy the Thanatos warhead. The endgame begins. The Luna Base rail cannon powered up, its superstructure groaning under the strain. The warhead was lowered into position, its containment field barely holding together. Then, a launch sequence began. The lights flickered, the base trembled, and in one final blinding flash, the weapon fired. Impact. The Thanatos warhead streaked through space at near-light speed, a sliver of absolute annihilation. When it reached Proxima Centauri, it detonated. Silence. And then, reality broke. Silence. For the first time in months, the war room was completely silent. No alarms, no incoming enemy signals, no urgent battle reports, just an empty, hollow stillness. The Thanatos warhead had detonated, and Proxima Centauri was gone. Not just the enemy fleet, not just the battle, the entire system. The star itself had collapsed, its energy converted into a dark singularity, a wound in space that twisted and pulsed, growing larger with each passing second. They had won. And in doing so, they had broken reality. The horror of what they had done. Rourke stared at the holographic projection, his face pale. The Proxima Centauri system, once a bright beacon in humanity's expansion, was now a spiraling abyss of dark energy. And at its center, something moved. Vasquez's voice was barely a whisper. Sir, the readings are off the charts. I don't even know what we're looking at. Kasparov clenched her fists. What the hell did we just do? Vale exhaled slowly. We erased them. The Xan'Thal warlord stepped forward, his voice unreadable. Number U unleashed something. Rourke turned sharply. What do you mean? The architect's voice returned, colder than before. You have opened a door. The room fell dead silent. And then, a new signal appeared. The last enemy arrives. Deep within the swirling black void, something was coming through. Not the enemy fleet, not the Xan'Thal. Something older, something the architects had never spoken of. Vale's face darkened. Oh, hell. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. The architects had always been silent. They had spoken in warnings, in cryptic words, in half-truths. But now, they owed answers. Admiral Elias Rourke stood at the head of the War Council, staring at the massive holographic projection of the Proxima Centauri system, or what was left of it. The Thanatos warhead had worked. The enemy was gone. But so was everything else. And now, something else had arrived. Something the architects had never spoken of. Rourke's voice was cold, controlled. What the hell did we just unleash? For the first time, the architects hesitated, and that terrified him more than anything. The architect's secret. The war room dimmed, and the architects' voices echoed through the chamber. You call them a threat, but they are not a force of war. They are a force of the universe itself. Rourke's stomach twisted. What does that mean? The holographic display shifted, and then the truth was revealed. They weren't dealing with a species, not an empire, not even an enemy. What was coming? It was the end of all things. The true enemy revealed. The architects spoke, their words etched with finality. The first civilizations knew of them. They did not fight them. They did not resist. They simply vanished. Silence. Kasparov's voice was hoarse. You're telling me this thing has wiped out entire civilizations before? Yes. Vale's jaw tightened. And you never thought to mention that? The architect's response was chilling. Because you were never meant to survive this long. The room froze. Rourke felt the weight of their words like a hammer. Humanity was never supposed to make it this far. The architects hadn't warned them, because they didn't think it would matter. And now? They had opened the final door. The thing beyond the void was watching. And it was coming. The final choice. The architects had given their answer. Now, Rourke had to decide. There was no more time to prepare. No more time to build superweapons. No more alliances to make. Only one question remained. Did they run? Did they fight? Or did they do something unthinkable? Rourke exhaled, his heart pounding. And then he made his final decision. The rift was tearing open. It wasn't just a hole in space. It was a wound. A bleeding, festering rupture in the fabric of reality itself. And something was coming through. Admiral Elias Rourke stood aboard the Titan, watching the live feeds from the Proxima Centauri system. The Thanatos warhead had worked. The enemy fleet was gone. But instead of victory, all they had done was invite something worse. Now, they had one chance. Seal the rift, or lose everything. The plan. Vale's voice was tight. There's no weapon for this, Elias. Kasparov folded her arms. Then we build one. The Xan'Thal warlord studied the rift, his voice a deep growl. If we cannot fight it, we must ensure it never reaches your world. Rourke exhaled. How? The architects finally spoke. You must destroy the rift itself. Vasquez frowned. Is that even possible? It has been done once before. A pause. Then Rourke realized. That's why there are no records of the first civilizations, isn't it? The architects did not answer, because they didn't have to. The only way to stop this was to erase everything connected to it. And that meant the Thanatos singularity itself had to be detonated. The last stand. We have to go back, Rourke said. The war room fell silent. Kasparov's face was pale. Back? Into that? Vale leaned forward. Jesus, you're talking about a suicide run. Rourke met his eyes. What other option do we have? A beat. No one spoke, because they all knew the truth. There was no other option. The final mission. The Titan and a strike force of Terran and Xan'Thal warships jumped to Proxima Centauri. Their mission was simple. Get close to the rift. Deliver the final payload. Seal the door before it's too late. But the moment they arrived, they saw it, and they knew they were too late. The end arrives. The thing beyond the rift had already begun to emerge. It had no form, No shape, only a presence that made the universe itself recoil. Stars dimmed, time stretched and twisted, and then it looked at them. Rourke's mind shattered under the weight of it. He felt his entire existence unraveling as he gazed into something that should not be. And yet, he moved anyway. Fire! The Titan's Thanatos core launched from the ship, streaking toward the rift like a final, desperate prayer. The entity reacted. A pulse of dark energy slammed into the fleet, tearing ships apart, killing crews instantly. But the Titan held its course. Rourke's vision blurred. His body burned from the inside out, but the detonator was in his hand. And in that last, final moment, he pressed it. The rift collapses. A shockwave rippled across the system. The rift imploded, dragging the entity back into the void. The universe screamed, and then there was only silence. Epilogue, Aftermath. 3 days later. The Titan did not return. Neither did Admiral Elias Rourke. But the war was over. The rift was gone. Earth still stood. And for the first time in centuries, humanity was free. Vale stood aboard the Luna Base Command Center, staring at the empty space where the Titan had vanished. Rourke had done the impossible. And he had paid the price. Vasquez placed a hand on his shoulder. What now? Vale exhaled. Now, we rebuild. She nodded. And after that? Vale's gaze darkened. He looked at the architects, still watching, still hiding secrets. And he knew, deep down, this wasn't really the end, just the beginning. Victory has a price, but because of those who stood, humanity endures. The war may be over, but the stars still hold secrets. And our story is far from finished. Like this video if you enjoyed the journey. Comment your favorite moment. Subscribe for more epic sci-fi adventures. See you in the next battle, soldier. Humanity endures. On fire.